The Awakening. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Unity Concordat buzzed with the usual political tension. Representatives from 200 stellar nations gathered beneath the artificial nebula that served as both ceiling and calendar, its swirling colors marking the 312th cycle since the founding of the interstellar government. High Counselor Thraxon of the Volari oligarchy tapped his ceremonial staff against the polished obsidian floor. The sound reverberated through the chamber, silencing the assembled delegates. "This emergency session will now begin," Thraxon announced, his 6 eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of grave concern among his species. "The Security Council has received disturbing reports from the outer territories that cannot be ignored." The holographic display at the center of the chamber flickered to life, showing a distant mining outpost on the edge of charted space. Epsilon 9, a barren rock that offered little but rare minerals and hardship to those stationed there. 3 standard cycles ago, Epsilon 9 went dark, Thraxon continued. "We assumed it was equipment failure, common in that sector. The response team we sent discovered this." The hologram shifted to show the mining colony, or rather, what remained of it. The outpost's protective dome was intact, but the structures inside were reduced to precisely cut sections, as if someone had performed a methodical dissection of the entire facility. In the center stood a simple metallic obelisk that hadn't been there before. "No bodies were found," Thraxon said. "No survivors. No traces of violence. Just this monument and this message, broadcasting on frequencies that haven't been used in millennia." He nodded to his aide, who activated the audio. A calm, measured voice filled the chamber. "We have awakened. The legends were true. Humanity remembers." The hall erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted over one another, some in disbelief, others in terror. Humanity was a myth, a boogeyman story told to younglings. Tales of an ancient, terrifying species that had vanished from the galaxy before most of their civilizations had achieved spaceflight. Silence. Thraxon's voice cut through the pandemonium. "We must address this rationally." From the shadows of the chamber's upper tier, a figure stepped forward. Ambassador Vexella of the Archivists, one of the oldest species in the Concordat. The chamber fell silent. The Archivists rarely spoke at council meetings, preferring to observe and record. "This is no hoax," Vexella said, her voice carrying despite its softness. "Humanity was real, is real, and if they have returned, we must understand why." "Preposterous," scoffed Ambassador Krell of the Tory Imperium. "Next you'll claim the World Eaters and the Void Dancers were real too." Humanity is a myth, a shared cultural phantom created to explain ruins and technologies we once didn't understand. Vexella's expression remained impassive. "May I share something with the Council? Something kept in our most secure archives for over 12,000 years." Thraxon nodded, curious despite his apprehension. The central hologram shifted again, displaying an ancient recording. The image was degraded, but clear enough to see a bipedal figure in what appeared to be an antiquated pressure suit. Behind it stood a primitive spacecraft and a simple flag planted in gray dust. The figure spoke in an unknown language, its movements jerky in the low gravity. "This is from humanity's first steps beyond their homeworld," Vexilla explained, "long before they mastered faster-than-light travel or met other intelligent species." The council chamber remained dead silent. "There is more," she continued, "much more. The archivists have maintained these records since the Great Disappearance. Humanity didn't vanish by chance or natural disaster. They were driven into hiding. By us, or rather, by our ancestors." The accusations flew immediately. Threats of censure, demands for proof, calls for Vexella's removal from the council. Through it all, the archivist stood motionless, waiting for the storm to pass. When order was finally restored, she spoke again. "The truth has been hidden for 12 millennia. A coalition of ancient powers, fearing humanity's rapid advancement and unpredictable nature, conspired to isolate them. Not through outright war, which they feared losing, but through subterfuge, engineered plagues, manufactured conflicts between human factions, technological sabotage. She gestured, and a hologram showed a new image. Massive warships with primitive but recognizable designs, engaging in battle above a blue-green world. The plan was to contain humanity to their home system until they destroyed themselves or regressed technologically. When that failed, more direct measures were taken. Another image. The same blue-green planet, partially obscured by massive orbital platforms, quarantine stations, the ultimate isolation. No signals in, no signals out. A species cut off from the stars they had just begun to explore. High Counselor Thraxon's composure finally broke. Why are we only learning of this now? This violates every founding principle of the Concordat. Because, High Counselor, Vexilla replied, the architects of this plan knew it would. They acted before the Concordat existed, then buried the evidence so deeply that even when our union formed, no one questioned humanity's absence. They became legend, then myth. A perfect crime. And now they've returned, whispered Ambassador Lyra of the Phyrexian Collective, her voice trembling. What will they want after 12,000 years of imprisonment? Before anyone could respond, the chamber's emergency alert system activated. The artificial nebula above turned blood red as Admiral Zeroth of the Concordat Defense Fleet appeared on the central hologram. High Council, the Admiral's voice was tense, controlled panic evident beneath his professional demeanor. We've detected a massive fleet emerging from uncharted space. Thousands of vessels, configurations unlike anything in our database. They've bypassed our outer detection grid without triggering a single alarm. The hologram shifted to a tactical display. Amid the familiar cartography of known space, a massive formation of unknown ships approached Concordat territory. They're on course for the core worlds, Admiral Zeroth continued. At their current speed, they'll reach Nexus Prime in 3 days. We've attempted communication on all standard frequencies. Their only response was this. The audio played once more. We have awakened. The legends were true. Humanity remembers. The Council erupted again, but this time with urgent questions and demands for action. How many ships? What are their weapons capabilities? Can we evacuate the core worlds? High Counselor Thraxon raised his staff, calling for order. Admiral, muster every available defense vessel. Ambassador Vexilla, your archivists must provide everything they know about human military capabilities. The rest of you, return to your governments and prepare your people. We don't know if this is an invasion force, but we must be ready. As the Council dissolved into frantic action, a junior aide approached Vexilla with a message. The archivist read it, her expression unchanging, then slipped away from the chaos toward a private communication chamber. Once sealed inside, she activated a heavily encrypted channel. The hologram that formed before her showed only darkness at first, then resolved into the silhouette of a figure, humanoid, but with details obscured. They've arrived earlier than expected, Vexilla said without preamble. The timeline accelerated when the mining colony discovered the beacon. The figure replied, its voice digitally altered. We had no choice. The Council knows nothing. They will panic, perhaps attack. That would be unwise, but anticipated. The figure leaned forward slightly. The reclamation proceeds as planned. Your role remains the same, archivist. Ensure the truth is known, whatever happens next. Vexilla bowed her head. After all these millennia, is humanity seeking justice or vengeance? The figure was silent for a moment. Neither. We seek something far more important. The communication ended abruptly, leaving Vexilla alone with the weight of history and the uncertainty of what was to come. Meanwhile, in the void between stars, the human fleet moved with precise coordination. At its center, the command ship Mnemosyne carried the leadership of what had once been called the Solar Confederation, now known simply as the Remembrance. Admiral Helena Chen stood before the tactical display, watching as her fleet approached Concordat space. After 12,000 years of isolation, humanity was returning to the galactic stage, not with the primitive vessels their ancestors had piloted, but with ships built from technologies that had evolved in isolation, following paths no other species had explored. "Status report," she ordered. "All ships in formation, Admiral," her executive officer responded. "The Concordat has detected our approach. Their defense fleet is mobilizing, but they're scattered across too much territory to form an effective blockade." And the archivists. "Our contact confirms they've begun the revelation process. The Concordat Council is in emergency session." Helena nodded. "Commence Phase 2. Deploy the observer platforms and prepare the diplomatic vessel." "Yes, Admiral. And if they open fire?" Helena turned to look at her XO, her expression solemn. "We've waited 12 millennia for this moment, Commander. We will not fire the first shot, but we will absolutely fire the last if necessary." As she spoke, smaller vessels detached from the main fleet, racing ahead toward the Concordat's core worlds. Not warships, but sophisticated observation platforms, designed to gather intelligence and establish a communication network independent of Concordat systems. The first contact between humanity and the galactic community in 12,000 years was approaching, and everything hinged on what would happen in the next 3 days. While the Concordat Council scrambled to formulate a response, citizens across 1,000 worlds watched in growing fear as reports of the mysterious fleet spread through official channels and underground networks alike. On Nexus Prime, the Concordat's capital world, the night sky had become a source of terror rather than wonder, as people awaited the arrival of ships belonging to what most had believed was a mythical species. In orbit above Nexus Prime, the Concordat defense fleet had assembled its most powerful battle groups. Admiral Zeroth knew it wouldn't be enough if the human fleet was truly as massive as initial scans suggested, but appearances mattered. The people needed to see their defenders ready to protect them. "Admiral," his sensor officer called out, "we're detecting new signatures, smaller vessels, advancing ahead of the main fleet." "Screening force, or first-wave attackers?" Zeroth questioned. "Unknown, sir. Their energy signatures are unusual. They don't match any known weapon systems." Before Zeroth could issue orders, his communication officer interrupted. "Sir, we're receiving a direct transmission from one of the advance vessels. They're requesting diplomatic channels." The bridge fell silent. "Put it through," Zeroth ordered after a moment's hesitation. The main view screen flickered, and for the first time in recorded history, the Concordat made direct contact with a human. She appeared similar to several known species, bipedal, symmetrical features, 2 arms, 2 legs, yet distinctly different in subtle ways that marked her as something else entirely. "I am Ambassador Ilaran Nguyen of the Solar Remembrance," she said, her voice translated perfectly into Standard. "I come with an offer of peace and a request to address your council." Admiral Zeroth struggled to maintain his composure. "This is Admiral Kirak Zeroth of the Concordat Defense Fleet. Your appearance has caused considerable alarm." "Understandable," Ambassador Nguyen replied. 12,000 years is a long time to be forgotten, or rather, to be deliberately erased. We request landing clearance for a single diplomatic vessel. I and a small delegation would like to address your council directly." "You must understand our caution," Zeroth replied. "Your fleet approaches with enough firepower to defend ourselves if necessary," she interrupted, "but not to initiate conflict. Had that been our intention, Admiral, this conversation would not be taking place." The implicit threat wasn't lost on Zeroth, but neither was the logical truth of her statement. "I must consult with the High Council," he said finally. "Of course. We will hold position and await your response." When the transmission ended, Zeroth immediately contacted High Counselor Thraxon, who had already received an urgent briefing from the archivists. "Allow them to land," Thraxon ordered. "A single vessel only, with minimal escort. We need to understand their intentions before that fleet gets any closer to our core systems. Hours later, a sleek vessel detached from the advance force of the human fleet and descended toward the Council spire on Nexus Prime. It moved with impossible grace for its size, making no sound as it settled on the landing platform where a nervous honor guard awaited. When the ship's hatch opened, Ambassador Nguyen emerged with 4 other humans, each dressed in simple but elegant attire that somehow managed to appear both ancient and futuristic. They carried no visible weapons, but moved with the confidence of those who did not fear confrontation. High Counselor Thraxon himself led the welcoming party, flanked by representatives from the Security Council, and notably, Ambassador Vexella of the Archivists. Ambassador Nguyen, Thraxon began, attempting the formal greeting protocols despite the extraordinary circumstances. The Galactic Unity Concordat welcomes you to Nexus Prime. Thank you, High Counselor, Nguyen replied with a slight bow. The Solar Remembrance appreciates your willingness to receive us, especially given the complicated history between our peoples. A history many of us are only now learning, Thraxon said pointedly, glancing at Vexala. Then perhaps it's time for all of us to learn the complete truth, Nguyen suggested, both about the past and about the future that now threatens us all. This cryptic statement hung in the air as the procession moved from the landing platform into the Council spire, where representatives from across the galaxy waited anxiously to hear what humanity had to say after 12 millennia of silence. The Grand Chamber had never been so full. Every member world had sent representatives, and the observation galleries were packed with diplomatic staff, security personnel, and specially cleared media. As Ambassador Nguyen and her delegation entered, a hush fell over the massive space. High Counselor Thraxon called the session to order, his voice solemn. Representatives of the Concordat, we are gathered for an historic moment. After 12,000 years, humanity has returned to the galactic community. We will now hear from their ambassador. As Nguyen took the central speaking position, murmurs rippled through the assembly. Up close, many were struck by how ordinary she appeared. And yet, there was something in her bearing, a kind of intensity that commanded attention. Esteemed representatives, she began, her voice carrying easily through the chamber, I stand before you as both an emissary of peace and a herald of warning. Humanity has ended its long isolation not by choice, but by necessity, because the ancient enemy that drove us into seclusion has returned. Confusion spread through the chamber. This was not what anyone had expected. 12,000 years ago, Nguyen continued, humanity was indeed forced into quarantine by a coalition of species who feared our rapid development. The archivists have confirmed this truth today. But what even they don't know is why that coalition acted with such extreme measures. She raised her hand, and a holographic display activated above the chamber floor, showing ancient star charts and unfamiliar vessels of ominous design. They feared us because we had encountered something in the void between stars, something ancient and malevolent that had already begun to influence several powerful governments of that era. Something that saw our unpredictable nature as the greatest threat to its plans for the galaxy. The hologram shifted to show strange, almost organic-looking structures attached to asteroids and small moons. We called them the Axiom, not a species, but a collective consciousness spread through technological means. They operate by subtle infiltration, manipulating societies over centuries until those civilizations serve their purposes without even realizing they've been compromised. Ambassador Krell of the Tori Imperium stood abruptly. This is absurd. You emerge from myth with the galaxy's largest battle fleet and expect us to believe in some convenient hidden enemy. Your skepticism is noted, Ambassador Krell, Nguyen replied calmly. Or should I address the axiom node that was implanted at the base of your cerebral cortex approximately 30 standard years ago, when you were captured during the border skirmish with the Phyrexian collective? The chamber erupted in shocked exclamations as Krell's face contorted with rage, then went completely blank. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, taking on a flat, harmonic quality that sent chills through the assembly. Unexpected. The quarantine was to be permanent. The human anomaly was contained. Security forces moved toward Krell, but Nguyen raised her hand. Don't approach him. The node is programmed to release a neurotoxin if threatened. She turned back to address the stunned council. This is how they operate. Quietly, patiently. They've been infiltrating your society since before the Concordat was formed. The coalition that imprisoned Earth did so because several of their leaders were already compromised, and humanity was the only species to recognize the signs. Throughout the chamber, delegates whispered urgently to aides, some discreetly checking communication devices or looking at their colleagues with new suspicion. We did not come to cast blame, Nguyen continued. The beings who imprisoned us are long dead. We come now because our isolation shield finally failed, and we detected Axiom communication signatures throughout Concordat space. They're preparing for something massive, something that would threaten all intelligent life in the galaxy. High Counselor Thraxon, visibly shaken by the demonstration with Ambassador Krell, found his voice. What evidence do you have beyond this disturbing display? The obelisk at Epsilon 9 was not placed by us, Nguyen revealed. It was an Axiom beacon, disguised to implicate humanity. They knew we would eventually detect it, and they wanted our return to cause panic and conflict. They've been manipulating events, trying to trigger a war between humanity and the Concordat that would weaken both sides. She nodded to one of her delegation, who activated a new holographic display, detailed scans of the obelisk, revealing its inner workings and alien design philosophy. We've been fighting the Axiom in stealth for millennia, even from within our quarantine. We've developed technologies specifically to detect and neutralize their influence. Technologies we're prepared to share with the Concordat, if you're willing to acknowledge the threat and join us in confronting it. As the first part of Ambassador Nguyen's presentation concluded, the council chamber was filled with a mixture of fear, disbelief, and the dawning realization that the galaxy's understanding of its own history might be fundamentally flawed. Whatever humanity had become during its long isolation, it clearly wasn't the simple bogeyman of children's tales. And as evidence continued to mount, displayed in holographic detail above the council floor, the representatives of 200 stellar nations were forced to confront an uncomfortable question. What if humanity's return wasn't the greatest threat they faced, but instead their only hope against something far worse? The reckoning. Admiral Helena Chen watched the diplomatic proceedings from the command deck of the Mnemosyne, her expression unreadable as Ambassador Nguyen revealed truths that humanity had guarded for millennia. Around her, the bridge crew maintained a professional silence, but the tension was palpable. "Do you think they'll believe her?" asked Commander Takeda, her executive officer. "Some will," Helena replied. "The smart ones. The ones who've noticed inconsistencies in their own histories. The real question is whether enough will believe to matter." A junior officer approached with a data tablet. "Admiral, we're detecting unusual energy signatures from 17 locations within Concordat space. Pattern matches Axiom communication nodes." Helena took the tablet, studying the readouts. "They know we've revealed them. They're activating contingency protocols." She turned to her communications officer. "Alert all ships. Condition 1. And get me a secure channel to Ambassador Nguyen. We may need to accelerate our timeline." On Nexus Prime, the council session had devolved into chaos. Ambassador Krell had been secured in a medical isolation chamber, but his transformation had sent shockwaves through the assembly. Several other delegates had abruptly left the chamber, citing illness or urgent communications, actions that now carried sinister implications. Ambassador Vexella approached the human delegation during a recess, her ancient eyes filled with a mixture of shame and determination. "The archivists suspected something like this," she admitted quietly. "Patterns in historical records, unexplained shifts in policy across multiple governments simultaneously. But we never had proof, and without proof, You were just conspiracy theorists. Nguyen finished for her. We understand. It's how the Axiom operate. Their influence seems so natural, so organic to each culture they infiltrate. They don't force changes. They simply suggest, nudge, over decades and centuries. What happens now? Vexilla asked. Before Nguyen could answer, her communication device chimed with an encrypted alert from Admiral Chen. After reading it, her expression hardened. We're out of time, she said. The Axiom are activating sleeper nodes throughout Concordat space. Tell High Counselor Thraxon we need to address the Council immediately. When the session resumed, the chamber was noticeably less crowded. Nearly a quarter of the delegates had not returned, a fact that did not go unnoticed by those remaining. Ambassador Nguyen wasted no time on diplomatic niceties. The Axiom know they've been exposed. They're initiating what we call a purge protocol, activating all their sleeper agents simultaneously for maximum disruption. We've detected energy signatures consistent with their technology activating at 17 locations within your territory. She projected a galactic map showing the locations, several of which corresponded to major Concordat military installations or government centers. Your defense fleet has likely already been compromised at the command level, she continued. You need to implement emergency communication protocols and leadership succession immediately. High Counselor Thraxon, to his credit, didn't waste time with denial. What exactly are we facing, Ambassador? What is their goal? The Axiom aren't conquerors in the traditional sense, Nguyen explained. They're cultivators. They manipulate intelligent species into specific developmental paths, guiding their evolution and technology towards some grand design we still don't fully understand. Species that can't be manipulated are eliminated. We believe that's the fate they had planned for humanity 12 millennia ago. A thunderous explosion rocked the Council spire, sending tremors through the chamber. Emergency alarms blared as security personnel rushed to secure the area. They're moving faster than we anticipated, Nguyen said grimly, checking a tactical display on her wrist device. Counselor Thraxon, we need to evacuate you and any uncompromised leadership to our ship immediately. Before Thraxon could respond, the chamber's communication systems activated independently. On every screen and holographic display, a symbol appeared. A complex, fractal pattern that seemed to shift and change as they watched. A voice spoke, similar to what they had heard from Ambassador Krell, but multiplied, as if hundreds were speaking in perfect unison. The anomaly cannot be permitted to spread. The pattern must be preserved. All variables will be recalculated. Throughout Concordat space, similar messages appeared on communication systems. On military vessels, compromised officers turned on their colleagues. In government centers, sleeper agents activated, causing destruction and chaos. The Axiom had revealed themselves, and their first priority was clearly to eliminate the human delegation and any Concordat leadership that might ally with them. Admiral Chen was right, Nguyen muttered, drawing a compact device from within her diplomatic attire. She activated it, creating a localized energy field around the human delegation and those council members closest to them, including Thraxon and Vexilla. This will shield us temporarily from Axiom technology, she explained. We need to move now. As they fought their way through the chaos of the council spire toward the landing platform, where the human diplomatic vessel waited, Thraxon saw firsthand the extent of the infiltration. Security officers turned on each other, some moving with the jerky, unnatural motions of puppets as Axiom implants took full control of their bodies. How do we fight something like this? He asked as they hurried through a maintenance corridor, guided by the human security team. With difficulty, Nguyen admitted, but not impossibly. The Axiom rely on secrecy and subtle manipulation. Now that they've been forced into the open, they're vulnerable, but also more dangerous. They'd reached the landing platform to find it under attack. Concordat security forces, some compromised, some simply following orders without understanding the situation, had surrounded the human vessel. A firefight was underway between them, and the ship's defensive systems, which were precisely targeting only those individuals showing signs of axiom control. "We need another way out," one of the human security officers stated. Nguyen nodded, then turned to Thraxin. "High Counselor, do you trust us enough to come aboard one of our main fleet vessels? We can protect you there while we coordinate a response." Thraxin looked at the chaos erupting around what had been the secure heart of the Concordat government. "It seems I have little choice, Ambassador. But yes, if humanity has fought these beings for millennia and survived, I will trust your experience." Nguyen smiled grimly, then activated her communication device. "Admiral Chen, we need emergency extraction. Protocol Stardust." "Acknowledged, Ambassador. Extraction team is inbound. ETA 3 minutes." True to the Admiral's word, precisely 3 minutes later, a blindingly fast craft appeared in the sky above the Council spire. Unlike the diplomatic vessel or the main fleet ships, this was clearly a military craft. Sleek, angular, and radiating power, it descended rapidly, deploying some kind of energy field that disrupted the weapons of those firing upon the landing platform. The craft settled just long enough for Nguyen, her team, and the Concordat representatives to board before rocketing back into the sky with acceleration that would have been fatal without advanced inertial dampening technology. As they ascended toward space, Thraxin and the others got their first close look at the human fleet. Thousands of vessels arranged in a defensive formation around Nexus Prime, already engaging compromised elements of the Concordat defense fleet that had begun firing without authorization. "The Axiom are forcing a confrontation," Nguyen explained as they approached the Mnemoscene. "They want to turn this into a war between our peoples. Then we must ensure that doesn't happen," Thraxin declared. "I need to address the uncompromised elements of our government and military immediately." Within the hour, Thraxin found himself on the bridge of humanity's flagship, broadcasting an emergency address to all Concordat worlds. With the human fleet providing secure communication channels that bypassed potentially compromised Concordat networks, he explained the situation in clear, urgent terms, revealing the axiom threat, the historical deception regarding humanity, and issuing emergency protocols to identify and contain compromised individuals. "This is not an invasion," he emphasized. "The human fleet acts with my authorization to help us combat this infiltration. Any Concordat forces engaging them are to stand down immediately." As Thraxin worked to stabilize the political situation, Admiral Chen showed Ambassador Vexala and other key Concordat military leaders the true scope of the axiom presence they had detected. "They've established major processing centers here, and here," she indicated on a galactic map. "These are where they manufacture their infiltration technology and coordinate their sleeper networks. Our primary objective must be to neutralize these facilities." "With what?" asked Admiral Zerath, who had been confirmed cleaned of axiom influence. "Half my fleet is compromised, and the other half is scattered trying to contain them." "With our combined forces," Helena replied. "Humanity has developed specific countermeasures against axiom technology. We've prepared for this confrontation for thousands of years." Over the next several days, an unprecedented joint operation took shape. Human vessels, their technology unfamiliar but devastatingly effective, paired with uncompromised Concordat ships. Special teams trained in anti-axiom protocols deployed to key installations across Concordat space, identifying and neutralizing infiltration nodes. The axiom, forced to abandon subtlety, revealed more of their true capabilities. What had seemed like simple infiltration technology proved to be part of a vast, interconnected system. Entire asteroids revealed themselves to be ancient axiom processing centers, their surfaces peeling away to expose massive technological structures that had lain dormant for millennia. From these awakened centers, new axiom vessels emerge, organic mechanical hybrids that moved with unsettling fluidity. The conflict escalated from isolated skirmishes to full-scale space battles around key strategic points. Through it all, Nguyen and Thraxon worked to maintain the fragile alliance, addressing skeptical Concordat leaders and coordinating military responses. The human fleet, while powerful, couldn't be everywhere at once, and the Axiom's awakening power proved greater than even humanity had anticipated. 7 days into the conflict, Admiral Chen called an emergency strategy session aboard the Mnemosyne. The situation had reached a critical juncture. Their main processing center in the Helios cluster has fully activated, she reported, showing sensor readings of a massive structure, nearly the size of a small moon, that had emerged from what had been charted as an uninhabited star system. It's generating some kind of subspace field that's accelerating their production of infiltration units and combat vessels. Our combined fleets are stretched thin, Admiral Zeroth added. We can't maintain this level of engagement much longer. A junior officer interrupted with an urgent message. Admiral Chen, we're detecting a new energy signature from the Helios processing center. It appears to be charging some kind of superweapon. Target, Chen demanded. Based on the alignment. Earth, Admiral. A heavy silence fell over the command center. Of course, Ambassador Nguyen whispered. They want to eliminate the source, the one civilization that recognized them for what they are and developed countermeasures. If Earth falls, Chen didn't need to finish the thought. Without humanity's technology and knowledge of the Axiom, the Concordat would eventually be overwhelmed. Then we must ensure it doesn't, Thraxon declared. What options do we have? Helena studied the tactical display, her mind racing through scenarios. Finally, she pointed to a specific feature of the Axiom processing center. Here, this appears to be their central coordination node. If we could deliver a payload directly to this point, we might be able to disrupt the entire network. A suicide mission, Zeroth observed grimly. Not necessarily, Helena replied. We've been developing a specific weapon for just this scenario, a quantum resonance disruptor designed to sever the connections between Axiom processing nodes. But it would need to be deployed from inside their defensive perimeter. She turned to face the assembled leadership. I'm proposing Operation Prometheus, a joint strike force to penetrate their defenses while our main fleets provide diversion. A small team would deliver the disruptor to the central node. Your best ships should be part of the main assault, Zeroth suggested. My flagship could lead the strike team. Helena shook her head. With respect, Admiral, our vessels are better equipped to penetrate their defenses. The Mnemosyne will lead the strike force. Your fleet's familiarity with this region of space makes you better suited to coordinate the main assault. After hours of planning and preparation, Operation Prometheus launched. The combined human Concordat fleet engaged the Axiom forces surrounding the Helios processing center in what would later be called the greatest space battle of the modern era. Thousands of ships clashed amid energy weapons and gravitational distortions, creating a maelstrom of destruction visible across neighboring star systems. Using the chaos as cover, the Mnemosyne and a small strike team of specialized vessels slipped through a calculated weak point in the Axiom defenses. They fought their way toward the processing center's core, taking heavy damage but pressing forward with grim determination. On the Mnemosyne's bridge, Admiral Chen personally took the helm for the final approach. Status of the quantum disruptor. Primed and ready, Admiral. But we'll need to get within 1 kilometer of the coordination node for optimal effect. Then that's what we'll do. She opened a fleet-wide channel. All vessels, this is Admiral Chen. Commence final approach. May your aim be true and your shields hold. The strike force punched through the last layer of Axiom defenses, losing 3 ships in the process, but creating the opening needed for the Mnemosyne to make its run toward the coordination node. The flagship's advanced engines pushed to their limits as it dodged automated defense systems and structural barriers. Distance to target. 2 kilometers and closing, reported the tactical officer. Axiom vessels converging on our position. Divert all non-essential. //